Yes, so today we are gonna talk about topic 4. And yes, the first reading is by Omid Safi. And basically what he is like giving a general overview of the states of Islamic studies, and he touches different areas within it. What we find most interesting is that he is after he's arguing that the discipline has opened up and there are more diversity within the scholarly body that works on Islam and within Islamic studies has been increased. So you have new approaches to Islamic study, feminist critique, you have post-colonial critique, you have what's he called, colored scholars?
Yeah, he calls them scholars of color.
Scholars of color, meaning that it's not just white males, white male Christian or Jews. It's broad in the field. Also, after 9/11, there's been a boom in Islamic studies, so there are like more tenureships and faculty members, and that opens up the debate of who can can study Islam, or have a voice within Islamic studies.
Right, and then what we noticed reading the text by Hughes is that in a defense toward a critique voiced by Safi towards Hughes, Hughes is laying out his own biography as a sort of justification for being a scholar within Islamic studies. He says, well, what Safi might have not known, but I told him, is that my grandfather's name is not Hughes, and he was actually a Lebanese Shia, and he was building up the first mosque in Canada. And so he is, by doing this, sort of justifying his own persona and pointing towards why he has a justification or a voice within the field of Islamic studies. And we find that critical, because by doing this he's reproducing this notion of, well, can just insiders then have a voice or study Islamic studies?
Exactly, it's a very interesting debate of who is insider and who is outsider, and what constitutes these two categories.
Yeah.
I have an example. I have my previous teacher in Persian studies at Copenhagen University. He has been an Iraniologist since the mid-90s, I think so. So that's almost 20 years. He has learned the language. He reads and writes and speaks fluent Persian, better than many Iranians, and Iranians have said that themselves. It's not just himself that's saying that. He's been living in Iran. He's been a very much active member of the local community in the city of Abadan in the south part of Iran. So he has a lot of experience. He with Iran and the Iranian communities, different communities, the culture, the language. He's been reading a lot, and he's been living in Iran. So is he an insider or is he an outsider? I mean, he's kind of in between, I guess you would say, if you because he, at first glance you could say, okay, he's not Iranian, he's an outsider, because he's studying Iran, right? But because he knows the language and he reads original texts, like original historical sources, and talks to people, and he's familiar with the Iranian culture, you can argue that he's an insider. And does he have a right to talk about Iran when he's not Iranian? And he's not Muslim either. He lives in Denmark now. But he's a very interesting case, and it's kind of I think for me is breaking down the categories of insider and outsider, because he is both and none.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what is interesting here is that if you're going to talk about insiders and outsiders, if a scholar comes in and, for example, studies Iran, and the difference to someone who is considered an insider maybe is that he has not been socialized, for example, in Iran. He has not grown up, so maybe what he is lacking is this experience. But on the other side, he comes in and maybe he can look at certain things from the outside and point towards things and ask, why is it like this? Or maybe he just comes from a different starting point, shaking up some things that maybe are taken for granted in the society as such. I'm not saying that he has therefore a better understanding. What I think is what could be useful actually for insiders and outsiders, if you want to draw those straight lines, if you can even do that, to work together, to bounce off and feed off of each other.
Yeah. Because it's different viewpoints and it's different opinions, because they come from different backgrounds. Like, I agree with you, there are probably some stuff he can see that people who are socialized in Iran, Iranians, born and raised there, are blind towards. And what he's been dealing with is actually minorities, ethnic minorities in Iran, where there's a big general understanding that these minorities are like this, these minorities are like that, the Baluchis are like this and they're like that, and he's kind of like examining that. And kind of taking it up as this is actually an issue that some of them are faced with racism, which, if you ask the Iranian, are probably not aware of at the same degree as he was. So he gives a different perspective. I'm not saying a right perspective, but a different perspective, and opening up something that maybe Iranians then could bounce off of and give their own opinions on. From their own experience. So by doing that, you keep on having, they benefit from each other, is basically what I'm trying to say. If you're drawing the line like that, because it's you have to be careful with it, and I think he is a clear example of somebody that is breaking down those categories of insider and outsider. And maybe you could argue that he's gone from an outsider to more towards being an insider, because clearly he knows. So at some points he knows more about Iran than Iranians. Definitely know more about Iran than other Danish people, or you know. So, but that also goes to show that this can work. Like, who has a voice within, or who is allowed to study these different fields is. I wouldn't say that only an outsider should do it, only an insider should do it, but could work together, because these fields are not constant entities.
Exactly.
They are changing, they are constructed, and you just need, and by dividing people in different categories is kind of limiting people also, and what they can say and what is being studied in the field.
You've researched the advancement of the field as such, I think, in a way.
You close it in the field, and it is open, especially in social sciences, like Persian studies and Islamic studies, minority studies, and migration studies, and all these.
So could we say then, as a conclusion, that before we draw it out, but that we think that it is not only up to insiders to study certain fields, or in this case, we talked about Persian studies, but also Islamic studies. But it is a feeding off of each other for both insiders and outsiders, and there shouldn't be the clear lines of who can say what, because we might miss out on interesting research in the future.
Because you can say people just have different viewpoints. Like, also, if you say people who are insiders also have different viewpoints. You know, it's just not like all insiders have one opinion, all outsiders have one opinion. It's like people are different and have different viewpoints. And that, if people could, what I want to say, I guess you said it. Yes, it works best like that, I guess.
Mhm.
I mean, because by kind of censoring who can say and who cannot say something about a certain field or subject is limiting.
Yeah.
And is not in the academic spirit, I would say,
Mhm.
of research, right?
Yeah.
Then there's I want to say more. I think we should cut it.
Yeah.
Should we do that?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the main point I want to underline is these subjects and fields are not constant entities.
Yeah.
They're changing. So as viewpoints.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.